everyone. Thank you for joining Resources for Your Business, Securing Investment, an installment of First Friday's webinar series on a conversation to promote inclusive economic competitiveness. This effort is a collaboration between LISC Indianapolis, Innopower, and the Indianapolis Recorder, where I'm a proud columnist. I'm also wearing my CEO hat today as President and CEO of Black Onyx Management, a management consultancy focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have with us today an outstanding panel of thought leaders who are going to share their insights on various kinds of investment vehicles for emerging community-based development organizations, real estate developers, and entrepreneurs across Indiana. As someone who studies Black economic issues, access to capital is one of the biggest challenges facing Black businesses. The Federal Reserve Small Business Credit Survey from 2021 report on firms owned by people of color found that 53% of Black business owners, Black business-owned firms reported struggling to get access to credit. And that was more than any other racial group in the study for just last year. The survey also reported that 85% of Black-owned firms experienced a revenue decline and a 53% reduced staff, which was more than any other racial group in the study, with the exception of Asian business owners. According to research with the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, Black entrepreneurs start their businesses with about $35,000 of capital versus white entrepreneurs who have $107,000. We know that locally, Indiana and Indianapolis struggle with business formation more broadly, and Black business formation in particular. A Brookings study on entrepreneurship in Indiana suggests that there's a significant gap in entrepreneurial activity, including business formation within the Black community, and that the mission-focused financing might be a potential solution. According to Brookings, Indiana lags the nation in the number of firms less than 5 years old, and the concentration of firms at 16 years or older indicates that there's an issue with business formation and even economic dynamisms. Black business ownership in Indiana stands at only 15% of the Black community's population, ranking Indiana 26th in Black business ownership relative to other states in the United States. Additionally, that Brookings study found that Indianapolis ranked 55th out of 85 metros in Black business ownership. The Indianapolis Disparity Study found that being Black in Indianapolis has been statistically correlated to having lower earnings when controlling for a variety of variables ranging from education, age, marital status, and gender. While Black businesses in Indiana outpaced their peers nationally in annual receipts, they had a lower expansion rate than any other racial group and a higher closure rate than any other group in the state. In government contracting, the disparity study found that Black businesses received only 49% of every dollar they were available to receive. They were also denied business loans at dramatically higher rates than white businesses. We know that the development of Black businesses in marginalized communities has a significant benefit. Brookings scholar Andre Perry localized this massive economic opportunity for the Indianapolis Carmel Anderson MSA and found that if there were parity in business formation relative to the Black population and the non-Black community, there'd be over 5,800 more employer Black businesses in the MSA. Perry also found that Black businesses created on average 19 jobs per firm compared to 28 for non-Black businesses. If the average employer per Black businesses increased to 28, the Black community could benefit from as many as 6,300 more jobs. This is coming at a time when you're thinking about unemployment level that was double digits for the last decade, from 2010 to 2019. Additionally, he observed that Black employer businesses pay on average approximately $24,000 compared to $49,000 for non-Black businesses. If there was equity for Black and non-Black employee pay, employees of Black businesses would experience an overall pay increase of $340 million. And that's just for the Black community. We haven't even discussed Latino businesses, women-owned businesses, and other groups. So we have the makings of a wonderful discussion as we have big problems with huge opportunities and real experts here to help us figure this out. We have Rinder Thomas with NDCDC, Jonathan Romine with Second Muse, Rob Panos with the Sagamore Institute Community Wealth Impact Investing, and Jennifer Bottenbach with CICF. Thank you all for joining us today. Gentlemen, I'm going to start with Jennifer Bottenbach with CICF. So Jennifer, you're with the Central Indiana Community Foundation. Can you tell us about yourself and how does the work of CICF connect with inclusive economic competitiveness?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marshawn, and thank you for everyone attending today. As Marshawn said, I'm Jennifer Bartenbach. I am the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at the Central Indiana Community Foundation, where I have been for a little over 8 years. As many of you probably know, our mission at CICF is to mobilize people, ideas, and investments to make this community a community where all individuals have equitable opportunity to reach their full potential, no matter their race, place, or their identity. One of the things that I was going to focus on today is I am a co-founder of Impact Central Indiana, which is the impact investing arm of our 3 foundations held under the CICF umbrella. The focus of our impact investing arm is on Black and Brown entrepreneurship and land acquisition to ensure affordable housing and neighborhood-led community development. A few projects that we are working on in this space. We partnered with the Indy Chamber and Business Ownership Initiative in early 2020 and made an investment in their loan fund. In our dollars, which was a little over $500,000, were specific to Black and Brown entrepreneurs impacted directly by COVID-19. We've had 100% repayment on these loans, where the chamber did a great job of removing the traditional underwriting and going to a relationship underwriting strategy with wraparound services for these businesses. So we're really excited about the success of those dollars into our Black and Brown community. We've partnered with Cook Medical Group and Goodwill to build a light manufacturing plant at 38th and Sheridan on the east side of Indianapolis, where we'll create 100 jobs in a neighborhood that desperately needs jobs and employment opportunities, along with a grocery store, and are now tackling some housing issues in that area. We are launching the Central Indiana Racial Equity Entrepreneurship Fund, which will focus on investing in our Black and Brown entrepreneurs. We are doing this right now with a partnership with Pitch Feast and Kendria Williams, where we are doing pitch competitions right now twice a year with a focus on Black and Brown entrepreneurs, where we're making investments of around $55,000 each round that we're doing the competition. The last piece is we just are in the process of acquiring some land over in the Riverside neighborhood, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure affordability and affordable housing and community-led partnerships in a neighborhood that is changing and growing, and we're trying our best to help with the gentrification and other pieces happening in that area. Thanks.
Lots of activity happening with CICF with impact and competitive and economic inclusiveness. We're going to move to Rinder Thomas with Indy CDC. Rinder, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Indy CDC, what it is that you're doing, the type of tools you're working with, and who you like to work with?
Yeah, thanks, Marshawn, and definitely thanks to everyone who's attending. I'm always happy to talk about Indy CDE, plug what we do, and just build awareness of our organization. So my name is Rinder Thomas. I'm a program manager with Indianapolis Redevelopment CDE, or Indy CDE for short. Just to give you a little background about us as an organization. So we were formed in 2009. We're certified by the CDFI Fund, which is a subsidiary of the Department of Treasury, as a community development entity. And really just our overall goal is to support transformative projects throughout Indianapolis that focus on addressing blight, tackling high unemployment and poverty, and focusing on the city's most distressed neighborhoods. We have awarded $142 million in New Markets tax credit financing since we started. back to 14 projects. And we've estimated the economic impact of these investments at about $1.1 billion in the city. So we're definitely excited and proud of that. I do want to note the city of Indianapolis is our controlling entity, so we do fall under the city. And with that, I've mentioned New Markets tax credits, so I do want to discuss that program a little bit if you're not familiar with it. So I touched on that, but the New Markets tax credit program has been around since 2000. It's a federally administered program, but the goal of the program is to stimulate private investment in low-income communities by increasing access to capital. And really, the CDFI funds priorities are growing businesses and providing jobs and supporting healthy local economies. I also want to note the program was actually recently extended through 2025. They've also increased the amount of allocation that's available to $5 billion total. So that's the amount of money that us as CDEs can apply for each year. And they've awarded $70 billion in tax credits since the program was started back in 2000. So it's been around for a while. I'm going to talk a bit more about the kind of projects that IndyCD has invested in the past and projects that we like to invest in. One of the big ones, it's sort of been pretty popular with us and other CDs, is manufacturing facilities. We haven't actually invested in one to date, but it's definitely a project that we're interested in. Just some other examples. Obviously, food insecurity is a huge issue. So supermarkets and other similar projects in low-income neighborhoods is a big one. We've invested in business incubators and some other things we focus on are redeveloping abandoned sites. We've done some community facilities as well, some health and wellness facilities, some charter schools, and then another really big thing that we've liked to invest in is remediating environmentally contaminated property. So those are just some examples. That list isn't exhaustive. I just wanted to give a few examples of projects that we are interested in or have invested in. And then I think it's important to touch, I kind of touched that projects kind of maybe have indicated that, but kind of want to talk about some of our priorities and outcomes that we like to look for when we're investing these New Markets tax credits. And these outcomes are a combination of both the CDFI funds priorities, as well as, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with this, but probably are, the city of Indianapolis has inclusive growth priorities as well. So a big one is we like to see the generation of what we call good jobs. So good jobs are jobs that pay $18 an hour or more and provide health benefits. But also another big thing that we focus on is projects that provide jobs as well, that lead to skills that could lead to these good jobs, so to speak. Those are definitely a really high priority. And then just some other priorities that we've included in that. So like obviously jobs are a huge one, and stimulating economic activity and economic growth is big, but we kind of take like a holistic approach, and there's a variety of, I won't go into them in depth here just because probably not a lot of time, but they're available on our website. So we like focus on social support, like food insecurity, public health, reentry support, eliminating homelessness, educational attainment, organizations that help with that, and then neighborhood and economic development. So that's sort of like an overview of what we do. Yeah, I think that's all.
Thank you, Render. I was familiar with CDFI, but not CDE. And so that was helpful for us to understand kind of the work that you are doing. We're going to move to Jonathan Romine with Second Muse. Can you tell us about your organization, the work that you're doing, kind of tools that you like to leverage and impact you're looking to make?
Yeah, of course. And thanks again, Marshawn, for being such a great moderator. I appreciate it. And to the rest of you, excited to be on this panel with you. And then to those watching, thanks for joining us on a Friday afternoon. Real quick, I am a proud born and raised Hoosier and graduate of one of the state universities at Ball State University. And I would say I'm a recovering entrepreneur. So over the last 15 or so years, I've started and sold some businesses. But for the last 3 years, I've been with Second Muse. And real quick origin story of why I joined Second Muse. You know, as Marshawn, you alluded to it earlier. As a white male, I've had all the privilege in the world for building a business. And so even though some things were difficult, it wasn't anywhere close to several of my friends who struggled in our communities to build businesses just because they were either female or minorities. And so for me, joining Second Muse was an opportunity to help eliminate some of those barriers as somebody that has that privilege. So super excited to be here. Second Muse has been around for about 13 years. We're a global organization, and the root of what we do is build community, and at the heart of that are entrepreneurs. And we oftentimes compare what we do to thinking about the human body. The human body does not work if you cut off a whole system. So if you cut off the whole respiratory system, the human body won't work. Yet oftentimes in our communities and society as a whole, we've done that to segments of our population and then wonder why things don't work. And so we approach from that perspective. You know, we like to think that the economic development piece is sort of that vehicle to solve these problems, just because economies drive community. And so the way we do that is, like I said before, through entrepreneurship, and that might be in the form of running incubators and accelerators at the community level, or specifically to a sector in New York City. We're focused on clean tech. In the Midwest, we've been focused on what we call Main Street entrepreneurs, so the bulk of what makes up the economy in the U.S., because oftentimes that's where the solutions are to solving community problems. But we also do ecosystem building, which for me personally is my favorite, to where we take a backseat to everybody already doing the work and serve more as a coordinating role to make sure those things that are happening in the community are working together. So this would be a perfect example of that. Like Marshawn, you're doing amazing work. Jennifer, Rob, Render, all of us together, you know, are doing amazing things. And how do we make sure that we're all like moving forward together? And for me, that's the most exciting piece. And then the last thing that Second Muse has done for the last 13 years is around this idea of open innovation. And so that's how do we get things like NASA data in the hands at the community level. So I think it launches this week or next week. Our Space Apps program is a partnership with NASA. That's an open innovation program. It's a hackathon, global hackathon focused on using NASA data to solve problems, whether it's at the community level or at the global level. So it's very exciting things that we're doing. But at the end of the day, the way we operate is it's in our name. You know, we don't ever try to edge anybody out, because nobody knows their community better than the people that are on the ground. So sometimes it's, you know, in Battle Creek, Michigan, we've been supporting Main Street entrepreneurs to, you know, you talked about that unemployment rate. In the height of COVID, it was over 20% in Battle Creek, Michigan. And those most impacted were minorities, and people that fell below the United Way ALICE level. And so survival level. So how do we support those entrepreneurs? And then we do have some work that we do in the capital space, and not from we have this huge capital fund that we manage, but partner with organizations that traditionally have had a harder time, specifically sectors of populations that have had a harder time of building capital funds, because whether they're a minority or access to those capital. And for us, there's a variety of ways that we do that. We don't believe that there's a one size fits all approach to capital, which is what I'm excited to hear a little bit more from both Jennifer and Render and Rob as well on the types of capital that y'all are influencing. And then to your last point, Marshawn, impact. I think for us, impact is like, you know, better infrastructure, better connected communities. If you and I aren't talking to each other in a community, Marshawn, but we're trying to solve the same problems, even though we look different, then we're not building equitable communities. And so how do we work together collectively, all of us that are in the same space, to really make sure that the work we're doing is having that longer term, Render, to your point, not just an economic impact, but also a social and environmental impact. So for us, everything we do is to make sure that we don't sacrifice any part of the human or the environment. So we really operate from that sort of triple bottom line of sustainability, build economies that benefit people as well as protecting the planet. So excited to be here and to learn from each of you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Really exciting to hear all the work that you all are doing with Second Muse. Sounds like a dynamic organization. Finally, and certainly not least, we have Rob with us with the Sagamore Institute. So Rob, can you tell us a little bit about Sagamore Institute, your work there, kind of the tools you're leveraging and what you're trying to see from an impact perspective?
Absolutely. Thanks. Great to be with you, Marshawn. Great to be with all of the panelists. Jonathan, just really appreciate your comments about this collaborative model and how we can all come together leveraging our unique strengths. Sagamore Institute is a policy research organization based here in Indianapolis, more commonly referred to as a think tank. We focus on community renewal and entrepreneurship among a number of other policy programs. But as a research organization, we're taking a multi-layered approach to our problem solving, whatever the policy area might be. But unlike most think tanks who are looking at government and looking at top-down legislative solutions, we believe in the power of the individual, the citizen, the business owner, the marketplace to drive solutions. So in all that we're doing, we're looking at those three sectors, public, private, and citizens on developing the best solutions in a holistic way. So one of the ways that we've deployed that is through an impact investing platform called Commonwealth. So we unlock donor advised fund capital. There's over $140 billion sitting in donor advised funds around the world today. So unlocking some of that capital, combining it with private and public sources to invest in these causes. And Commonwealth has a number of geographies that we work in. We work in Florida, Texas, and Indiana. In Indiana, we're primarily focused on this issue of minority entrepreneurship and access and deploying capital into those causes. This started for us about 3 years ago, a partnership with Jalen Smith, who is a Dallas Cowboys football player. Jalen grew up on the southeast side of Fort Wayne, Indiana, in a difficult neighborhood. Didn't have a lot of successful role models, particularly those in business, but he always wanted to be a businessman himself. Fortunately for him, he made his way out of poverty through athletics, went on to Notre Dame, and then to be a Pro Bowl linebacker for the Cowboys. And now Jalen is using his platform to help inspire others and create more pathways to opportunity for minorities. So in 2019, we held our first pitch competition in Fort Wayne, Indiana with Jalen through what's called the Minority Entrepreneurship Institute that Commonwealth operates. We invested about $200,000 in 3 companies that were competing in that pitch competition. But perhaps even more impactful than the capital, we had a couple dozen kids in the audience, and these guys were running around, and gals running around the city, thinking about business for the first time as a pathway for them. So trying to inspire that next generation and again, just increase the access for those that haven't seen this as a possibility for them before. Since then, MEI has invested about $1 million in minority-owned businesses alongside providing educational services. But more recently, Blair Milo came over to the Sagamore and Commonwealth team, who recently served as the Secretary for Career Connections and Talent under Governor Holcomb, mapping our talent ecosystems for the state of Indiana. And she's joined Sagamore and built what's called the Center for Talent and Opportunity to do a similar thing for entrepreneurship for minorities and female founders. So much like Second Muse, the Center for Talent and Opportunity will serve as an ecosystem builder, helping to align the efforts of entrepreneur support organizations, of investors, and really to uplift all of the work that's already happening across the state of Indiana. So under that center, we have the work of MEI that's investing capital directly. We have Innopower and Emil Ekior, who runs the annual Minority Business Conference. That's part of that team as well. And then we have a physical space to utilize for trainings and other services in Cohatch, which is the facility I'm sitting in now. And there'll be 8 to 10 of these around Indianapolis. that will incubate and help to scale minority-owned businesses. So again, kind of bringing together all these resources, seeing how we can leverage one another to have the greatest impact for Indiana and our minority and female founders here. That center, we are now looking at a fall investor forum. So in terms of what's coming up next, where investors, private, public, foundations will have an opportunity to come together and connect with some of the founders that we've identified here in our community. Really, with the long-term goal, we want Indiana to be the best place in the country for minority and female founders to start and grow a business. So pulling together a lot of these resources, we are really excited about collaboration. We want to just invite in and uplift all the amazing work that's already happening here in our communities and just be another vehicle to advance this change.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you all, the panelists. You all are doing amazing work. And when I started with data because I'm a data-driven kind of person, and it sounds like you all are the same. We're facing some significant headwinds, both from this at the state level, when you're thinking about business formation, as well as really you look at Indianapolis and the region. And so there's really some opportunities here. Let's get to the brass tacks of it. Who is your ideal client, partner, customer, person that you want to work with? And let's talk about, like, you know, what kind of tools you want to use, the size, the scale, financing needs. Who are you looking for? Because we're talking to community-based development organizations, entrepreneurs, and real estate developers in this audience. So who are you trying to reach? And I'll let you all just kind of, Rob, we're on you, so we'll let you start.
Great. Yeah, we are really taking a three-pronged approach. We are looking to connect with entrepreneurs themselves and helping to connect them to services, understand their models, see how we can support them either through education, capital, connections that we can make. We're also looking for investors who are interested in this space but don't know where to start, that we can plug them into the right area. And then we also are interested in serving those support organizations that are already out there. So being that connector across all of those spheres, helping to align the different interests. And again, looking at Blair's work that she did with the state, mapping our talent regions, we ultimately want to accomplish a very similar thing where we can map the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Indiana. So whether you're the entrepreneur, the investor, or the support organization, you can step in to a new space and know exactly where to plug in and where you can add the most value.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Anybody who wants to go next?
I'll go. I would echo similar to what Rob said, but we're really focused on businesses that are either in their infancy, just starting out, along with businesses that are scalable. And so we really look at our partnership with Pitch Feast as those that are still in the beginning stages of development, perhaps don't have access to friends and family dollars, as most of our Black and Brown entrepreneurs do not. And so that's really in the starting stages of the businesses. We also, I didn't mention in my intro that we are holding the fund that is connected to Next Studios. That is a studio concept for entrepreneurs that is running Discovery Weeks based on women, LGBTQ, Black and Brown, and rurally disadvantaged. So those are typically scalable businesses. So our, ideal situation would be those businesses going from Pitch Feast, growing, and then being eligible for a next studio cohort. And then from, you said real estate is thinking about the land that's available that we could acquire to really help gain site access so that neighborhoods can figure out what's next for them. So really having that opportunity as well, along with investors and donors that are looking to have an impact in their communities.
Awesome. We'll go with Rinder. And so Rinder, what are you looking for? What kind of deals? Because you're a CDE, so you got to Yeah,
Yeah.
your specific kind of tools and stuff.
Yeah. So we really, I guess I can touch on, but we really have like two, I guess I'd describe it as two tools. But I'll talk about like our ideal project partners. And this sounds kind of broad, but we're really just looking for for-profit or nonprofit project partners that are trying to invest in distressed or severely distressed census tracts. And those are, you can find like that, when I say distressed or severely distressed, that's defined by the Department of Treasury and CD5 fund, and you can look up the specifics. Unfortunately, most census tracts in Indianapolis qualify as distressed or severely distressed, but it's just dependent on like unemployment, poverty rate, median income, things like that. I do want to note new markets tax to use a direct allocation. Development, it's the project needs to be pretty sizable, so development costs should fall between 5 and 15 million. So we're talking about pretty big projects. But really the purpose of those direct allocations are people that need gap financing. So if you've built a capital stack for your project and you still have a gap to fill, new markets tax credits is a very, very effective tool at filling those gaps. And I'm not, I could probably speak for 4 hours if I dove into the mechanics of new markets tax credits, but the way to think about it is just a really low interest rate loan. That's me like simplifying probably one of the most complex tax credit programs into like a 4-word summary. And like really like I touched on the projects in my intro, but we're really, I mean, at the end of the day, it's either, providing jobs to low income people or pathways to jobs. And then providing either just providing goods and services to low income communities that otherwise wouldn't be available. And then just another note, I touched on in my intro, but new markets tax credits is also designed to help mitigate issues that would otherwise probably scare investors or developers off, like abandoned properties or brownfields or things like that. That's sort of, I don't really want to call it a gap, but it's good at mitigating those issues. And I know low income communities, unfortunately, that can be a big problem. And that does scare investors and developers and people away from that. I'll touch on it really briefly. We also have something called the Grow Indianapolis Fund, which is financed by new markets tax credits, but we created that to give us a little bit more flexibility in smaller loans. I wouldn't describe them as small business loans, but those loans are between $250,000 and $4 million. So smaller than the 5 million, but still not necessarily small loans. And those work much more like a standard business loan. So the two things we offer, the direct allocation, which is for those big projects, and then the Grow Indianapolis Fund, which is for smaller projects. Grow Indianapolis Fund can only be for profit. I do want to note that sometimes. Okay. But yeah, that was a lot, but.
Well, I was wondering how you were going to explain new market tax credits because I'm familiar with it. So it's a loan. It's a low interest loan. I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's how I would. If you're somebody looking for them, just think of it as low interest, very, very low interest rate loan.
Render said it's a very low interest loan. I'll take it.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, your organization, like you all think big ecosystem builders, partners coming in and supporting others. Can you talk about like your ideal situation and what you're looking for when you're going into markets and kind of the things that you like to see?
Yeah, I think. Well, that's a loaded question, Marshawn. But I don't know if I could define an ideal, right? Like I think oftentimes when we think of situations or opportunities, we think of where there isn't a desire for prescriptive solutions or more of the same. And I think, specifically on the ecosystem building and the incubator and accelerator side, like the experts are at the community level. You can bring in national experts, you can bring in all of these sorts of people and like Google and YouTube and all of those things. But at the end of the day, nobody knows what is going to work in a community better than the people on the ground. So our whole incubator, accelerator, and ecosystem building model is around community sourced. And so that idea of like, bringing Jennifer, bringing Rob, and bringing Render all to the table, bringing you, Marshawn, all of you to the table to help create the solutions versus that prescriptive approach. And the same is true on capital. I think oftentimes what we see in the capital markets that we've been involved in, it's we're creating the same systems that excluded, like some capital markets are creating the same systems that excluded people in the past. They're just led by maybe somebody with a different color skin or a different gender. And so we're perpetuating the problem in a different way. And so we run, from a capital perspective, we have what we call a future economy lab. And the thesis is designed by the community that it's going to directly impact. So instead of you and I, Marshawn, having coffee and say, hey, let's put together a $100,000 fund because we think this is what they need over here. Well, in fact, they needed something else. 100,000 would be great, but they needed something else for that $100,000 to be the most impactful, right? And so instead of having that prescriptive solution in the communities we go into, we look for communities or opportunities where, like, to your earlier point, like we can get down to brass tacks and the community can solve the problem. Our goal isn't to go into a community and be there forever. If we do that, then we fail as an organization. Our goal is to help bring expertise and learnings from other places, whether it's in this country or other countries, that can be applied at the local level based on the solutions that might need that little extra boost that are already being put together in the community. Because at the end of the day, it's not about me, it's not about Second Muse, it's about the organizations and the people on the ground, all the way to the entrepreneur on the ground in an Indianapolis, a Fort Wayne, or wherever that may be. And so for us, I think it's hard for people to understand that this isn't we aren't coming in so Second Muse can hang a banner. We're coming in so we can kind of play that background organizing, collaborating, building role that there never seems to be space and place for organizations to do that. And we've seen this in just about every community. We don't create that space to actually understand the roots of the problems that exist. We just go ahead and we just plow forward. We need instant impact when you can't make as big of an impact if you don't understand the root of the problem.
No, that's totally, I think design and thinking about the problem and actually talking to folks is key. I think it's actually key to a lot of the work that everyone's talking about here. You all, so the audience has found the chat function and they are putting questions. And so we will make sure that we get to those questions. I'm glad that you all are raising important issues. And one of them that I actually want to pull out is working with individuals who are returning citizens and may have a criminal history. How do you all engage with those organizations? What programs and initiatives do you have?
I'd be happy to start with that one. Commonwealth operates a program in partnership with the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. It's based in Houston, but serves men around the country, teaching entrepreneurship curriculum in state prisons, and then assisting them to launch and scale businesses when they return to society. As we all know, it's with a criminal background, it can be very difficult to find a job, to start a business, to navigate these systems. So wanting to equip those men with these entrepreneurial skills to be able to find their own work and employ other individuals in a similar situation. But it's not just about those that start a business themselves. It's more about this idea of a startup life. Entrepreneurs come with this wide-eyed view of what's possible, and we really want to help these individuals as they're coming back into society to recognize that they can start fresh again, that they can pursue opportunity. And so that's one way that we are trying to help a few individuals, but inspire many more to do so. And this impact investing space as well is unique because it's not a traditional capital market. We're not going through a traditional bank loan process. For many of our loans, it's that donor advised fund capital where it really just takes an individual to have an interest in this work and to want to commit their funds. It's much lower risk capital. If the business were not to make it, that was going to be given away as a grant anyway. So there is less risk in that. But at the same time, we're trying to bring this rigor to it as well to show that these businesses are viable that they do produce financial returns, and to help uplift the entrepreneur in the process so that they can access some of those more traditional capital markets.
That's outstanding. I think one of the interesting things about the work that you all are doing is that, or at least in the one way you can look at it, is that it stands as maybe a challenge, not maybe a direct challenge. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. You have your traditional financing institutions, and then we have the work that you all do, and you all are available for entities and folks that maybe can't get what they need from the traditional financing institution, but they find you and you're able to help them. When you think about your organizations and the folks that you work with, how does a business know what type of investment is a good fit for them? You know, I mean, it's because you could do grants, you could do working capital, you could do all sorts of different things. You know, I know I've seen maps where maybe credit is an issue, so maybe you need a credit builder product. How do you all navigate that with businesses?
So I'll give an example of our work with Pitch Feast. So that we had 4 winners out of our pitch competition in March. And I sat down with our in-house legal counsel with each of the winners and said, what works best for you? This is patient capital that if you want it to be a loan, what terms work for you? So I'll give an example. We had a Black female law firm that won the competition. So she received $25,000 and she wanted to add a position to her business. And so that position was eventually going to create revenue for her, but it was going to take time. So she did not want to begin paying on that loan for 6 months. So we were very flexible in the capital structure of the loan for her. 2 of the winners opted for a safe note or an equity investment, and then 1 did a revenue share. So she wanted her portion paid off over the summer because she worked at farmers markets, and that's when she had her highest revenue time. And so our dollars allowed her to purchase a van to transport items to the farmers market. So from our perspective, it's individualized and focused on what works best for the business.
And I'll just jump in real quick, Marshawn. I think yes to what Jennifer said, but I think the thing that oftentimes you put 100 entrepreneurs in front of me, I would be willing to bet that all 100 would say they need more capital. And when you ask the question for what, that's a little bit fuzzier. And so I think for us, like taking that time and creating that space to understand what they need more capital for, and sometimes they don't need more, like they don't need as much financial capital as they think. They actually need that social capital, and we don't spend as much time and much emphasis in the space of entrepreneurship really talking about the value that social capital is, because oftentimes it solves that need for whether it's a loan, whether it's a grant, whatever it might be. And I think using programming to like help people narrow in. Entrepreneurs like to be, wide reaching, and so help entrepreneurs really narrow in and focus on what they're building as an organization, especially those in the infancy stage. Like help them get super crystal clear and focused on what they're building first, because every entrepreneur wants to get to Z, but they also like to skip steps B through Y. And so like helping them, you might be able to skip a step here or there, but knowing that like building a business and entrepreneurship is really like a marathon instead of a sprint, and working through those pieces so they do get the appropriate capital that they need, whether that is a grant, whether that is a revolving loan type of fund, a line of credit, or maybe they need equity investment so they can get it to that next stage. And so I think, again, it's like getting back to the root of the entrepreneur and not prescribing, maybe Rob needs this type of capital, but Jennifer needs another type of capital, and having that ability to be flexible to meet those entrepreneurs where they're at, instead of assuming that every entrepreneur is going to go to a traditional institution and get, a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 loan, whatever it might be, or a revolving line of credit. And so I think, again, putting the entrepreneur at the center of that question goes a long way to solving for the appropriate capital that they would need.
So Jonathan, you actually raised an interesting point, which was going to be my next question. about the different kinds of capital. So in the space that you all are operating in, sometimes you have to weigh, well, oftentimes you're weighing the social versus the financial return. And in some instances, there's a school of thought that says that could be competing. Others might say different. Where do you all stand on that? How are you thinking about the social capital versus financial capital, or is it social versus financial return, or is it social and return?
Well, I don't think personally, I don't think you can look at them separately. That's the same in my opening. I talked about like looking at your body as, the respiratory system can operate without, the neurological system, right? You can't they have to work together. And I think, again, putting the entrepreneur at the center, when you balance like what their immediate needs are, Jennifer talked about the friends and family raise. And in Battle Creek, we had a fund dedicated that it was a grant, ultimately small grants, not big dollars that you can't find anywhere, like $2,000 to $8,000 grants, but it was the difference between them either continuing their business as a side hustle or actually turning it into a business, because they would have a full-time day job and then they would work on their side hustle because they were working that side hustle to raise for their business $2,000 and $3,000 to buy a piece of equipment so they could convert that to the next layer. And so I think that you can't talk about them separately, because the social impact will be felt by some capital investment, but that social investment into the financial side will also create social impact on the other side. And so looking at it as a system and looking at it as you have to focus on the whole piece, is where we stand. And I mean, the environment's an important piece of that equation too. Environment, whether we're talking about, water quality or access to goods and services, transportation, and the impact that might have. I think, so just looking at it as a whole system, you'll end up with the best results in each of the puzzles. And so sometimes, a funder might have a economic or a financial return impact. And so that's where that sort of future economy lab model that we use comes into play. It's like they might have the strong, they want return on investment, but the people that they want to invest in have a strong environmental investment. When we work those two together in a conversation, suddenly we're coming out with one that has not only the financial interest protected, but we're also thinking about the environment, and that ultimately creates a huge social impact. So you can't look at them exclusively, because I think historically that has created the problems that specifically those that don't have access to capital, minorities and women, that has perpetuated that problem, right? Because it is all about financial return. And so the social impact has been those folks have been excluded from access to that capital.
No, excellent points. Any additional thoughts on the issue of social capital or social returns and financial returns, and how that works in the work that you do?
So we really, when we think about our Impact Central Indiana portfolio, we are trying to have a balanced portfolio over both of those, right? And so we look at them as a continuum. So you may have a very low financial return, and when we say that, it's a 0 to 2% loan, but very high impact in the community, all the way to a Black tech startup entrepreneur that's high risk, but may, eventually when they're scaling their business, have a buyout that has significant return. So it's a really a large continuum that we look at, and we hope that we're balancing both that social impact, and for us, social is our Black and brown community, and women and LGBTQ. So we really are trying to balance that, the risk profile, the social return, and the financial return.
Something that's constantly managed. Yeah. Any additional thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'll just chime in. I like Jonathan's analogy of it's sort of like a holistic system, and with new markets you need to attract that sort of called hard money sources like banks and things like that. Us as Indy CDE are very, very, very focused on social outcomes, But you can't, we can't generate the social outcomes without that capital. But one of the ways I think I've sort of pitched it, is like, a lot of these things, we talked about reentry support, and a lot of people are just like, oh, that's just like a crime reduction tool. Really, it's an economic development tool. You're getting, these citizens are coming back into our communities, a pathway to jobs, food insecurity, public health. I mean, I think they're all, people perceive these as tools that fall into these things, but I mean, in my mind, all of them are economic development tools. So, yeah.
So this is a unique challenge when you're outside of the traditional financial market and you're doing this kind of impact work. So we have, community-based development organizations, we have entrepreneurs, and we have real estate developers. One additional question that came up was, what size, when you're thinking about an organization, is best positioned for an impact investment? Does size even matter of an organization?
I don't think so. I think it's a little bit of everything. We can partner with a company as large as Cook Medical and do a new market tax credit deal for a manufacturing facility, all the way to a startup. I do think when we think about entrepreneurship, specifically in our underappreciated communities, it's sort of like a funnel. And I think that the activity at the top is really, really strong, and there's always a focus on that. But I think that we are talking with our impact board and others to understand what happens in the middle of that funnel, and how do you also develop those that aren't the multi-million, billion-dollar companies. And how do you also make sure that they're being developed and not staying stagnant if that's not where they want to be. So I think we look at it in all scales.
And just to double up on that, one of the entrepreneurs we supported in Southwest Florida, our partner there is the Community Foundation, and has an impact investment fund. And their first impact investment was into a black woman pharmacist, multi-generation, I think 4 generations from our predominantly Black community in Southwest Florida. And she was full-time pharmacist working for the VA. So she was in idea stage when she came to us, and she was their first impact investment to launch a pharmacy in our predominantly Black community with a wellness component for educational opportunities for the Black community specifically, where there hadn't been a pharmacy that was accessible in over 60 years. And so I'm with Jennifer. Like, I think it's back to weighing that, like, the social impact of her specifically in a time of COVID, and there was an amazing story that ran last night about her and the educational outreach that she's doing in addition to testing and vaccines has been phenomenal. And so I think again, is when you start to weigh the impact long-term of investing, it was over $250,000 into an organization that didn't exist yet, but really jump-started and created that pathway, not only for her, but folks that follow her and see her as an inspiration in that community. So I think around impact investing, I think the impact is so important as part of that investment.
Maybe one more example. We've been working with a large employer here in Indianapolis as well, as they develop pathways to the good and promising jobs Redner was talking about, and thinking about what capital sources they might access even as a large corporation outside of their entity that could help them build out these programs to help low-income communities access these jobs. So that's something that the company is already committed to. They're devoting a lot of resources to. But if we could, multiply that through private foundation investments, through public dollars, we're only going to be able to get to the scale that we want to be at quicker than we could otherwise.
Certainly. So it sounds like you all have the ability and the interest really to work with organizations large and small and everything in between. And I think that's an important finding that's going to come out of this. We have folks that have reached out within the chat and within the groups that are interested in getting connected with you. So if you all could take a moment and within the chat, maybe provide some contact information so folks know how to reach you. I think we've talked about what you're looking for as far as ideal partnerships and relationships and the kind of impact that you're seeking. You all are operating in a system that has public, private, and philanthropic actors all kind of coming together, or potentially can come together. Are there more opportunities, or where do you see additional opportunities in the public, private, and philanthropic sectors collaborating to support each other?
Personally, I think the everyday philanthropist. I think every single person has a role to play in solving these inequities. And I think from a capital perspective or from an investment perspective, creating more opportunities for people to be able to contribute, who want to solve the problem, but maybe don't want to be the ones that control the solution or dictate how the money is spent. I think creating more pathways, and I think philanthropy has a great opportunity for that. But at the end of the day, it's policy. Like traditional institutions have all of these systemic barriers intentionally. And so at the end of the day, collectively, for all of us working in this space, we have to be able to get into conversations together with each other around how do we shift and change some of these policies that create these inequitable barriers for access to entry, whether that's formerly incarcerated, whether that's credit, whatever those things might be, because those negatively historically have impacted the underappreciated communities more, which I'm going to steal that, Jennifer, more than they've impacted my community. And so I think we have to be real that there are policies that have to change. And the only way those policies can change is if all of us in this space are collectively working together to change those policies.
Awesome. So opportunities for policy. We have about 3 more minutes. So any other closing thoughts, any other additional perspectives? I thank everyone for providing their contact information from the audience as well as our panelists. Well, thank you all for being here and participating in this conversation. You heard from panelists that were engaged in their respective communities. They're using impact investing to try to have a positive impact on organizations large and small. They're using sophisticated loans, low interest loans at the CDE to patient capital with CICF, thinking about social capital and other forms of capital with Second Muse, and with Sagamore, the opportunity to think about all the entrepreneurship and the focus on even returning citizens. And so a broad spectrum of work that's happening, very much appreciative of these organizations operating in our community. We started at the outset identifying the challenge as well as the opportunity. What's in between is institutions like the panelists here and individuals such as yourself in the audience who are willing to take advantage of the opportunities that these institutions may present. And so with that, I will close us out, and I appreciate everyone joining these conversations on income, inclusive economics, and competitiveness, hosted by LISC Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Reporter, and Innopower. Thanks, everyone.